Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition is a special, as we're joined by two exciting speakers, Professor Basir MChawi, who's no stranger to our airwaves, and he is a veteran of WBAI Education at the Crossroads. And then we have Miss Soraya Nickens. She's on the board of Cultural Caravan Productions. Welcome to Cultural Caravan TV. All
Thank you so
right.
much. Good to be here again.
Okay. Wonderful. So, the first topic we wanted to talk about is something that we've been hearing a lot about, which is critical race theory. I'm going to ask Brother Basir to tell us briefly what is critical race theory for those who are not familiar with the term.
Well, critical race theory originally is a legal strategy, a legal perspective that was first originated by attorneys Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw. Now, the idea of critical race theory was to look at the United States legal system using a specific critical lens that essentially put race first. That in regards to the laws and legal decisions that have been made historically in this country, that some people, of course, would attempt to try to look at these laws, decisions, with a race neutral perspective. Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw said that should not be the case. That if we look at the law, if we look at decisions being made in courts, we essentially, as African people, as lawyers who in fact are seeking to kind of protect the rights of African people, you should look at race first, not in terms of seeing law as being anything that is, quote, race neutral. And that's where it comes from. That's the origin of it.
Thank you so much, Brother Basir. Soraya, can you please share with us your thoughts about this topic?
Critical race theory is something that has been unfortunately hijacked by political operatives for their own purposes. Technically, it's also used, it is a critical look at how systemic racism has affected the advancement of African Americans in this country. And what's happened is that now conservative operatives have hijacked it, and they are now using it on television shows to um, land-based Democrats, to make it seem as if white people are being blamed for and being called racist and being blamed for problems that African Americans have experienced in the country. Now, if we look at it in the critical eye, from what it's called, we can see that in fact the government has had a lot to do with negative effects on African Americans. We see redlining, where whole communities were redlined and banks were forbidden to lend to people. This was done by the government. We see police harassment of Black people in general and Black men in particular that comes from higher sources and comes from government, because these are agencies that are in particular have been used to strangle really the vote. If you are somehow in police custody or within their sights or have a felony or any type of conviction, now that affects your right to vote. A lot of this is all tied up in with that, of keeping you down, of keeping you in a position where you can't compete. People talk about, if you look at what happened in Tulsa, what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina, where whole Black communities that were prosperous and right and well, in the case of Wilmington, this is right after slavery. The people hit the ground running and took over the town and were successful. And they were attacked by violent whites who killed and murdered and ran people out and took their property and took over the town. And the government did absolutely nothing about it. In Tulsa, people were attacked under the pretext of somebody raped somebody and they did nothing. So a lot of times the government is actually in cahoots with the people who have been terrorizing Black people. So coming back to critical race theory, how has this been a deciding factor in the achievement or lack thereof of African Americans? And obviously, it's been very powerful and it's been very critical.
You think about the fact that we're at a time where people in Texas are actually having what is known as revisionist history, where school children are not going to learn about the actual horrors of history because people deem it as being too much, too harsh. So a lighter version, or if any version of our history is being watered down to suit the needs of those who don't want to deal with the truth. So this is a concern that I have, and we all should have, because that means that, you know, those of us who try to tell the truth are looked at somehow as in a negative way. But aren't we, or how to, aren't our children? And I'm not just saying Black children, but all children, all people need to know the truth. Wouldn't you? What do you say about that, Brother Basir?
You know, when we look at what's taking place, you know, this is a backlash rooted initially in the election of President Barack Obama, and now continuing. The latest backlash is to the Black Lives Matter and the movements to go ahead and stop police violence, and also the movements to go ahead and get Confederate monuments taken down, because those two movements kind of coincided. So we're now faced with a backlash. And that particular backlash is people who, at this particular point, don't want to deal with the truth. I mean, the truth is simple, and it's real, and it is, there's only one truth. And the fact of the matter is that just like in the movie where Jack Nicholson is on the stand and he says, the truth, you can't handle the truth. These people cannot handle the truth. And the truth is that this particular country is built on stolen land with stolen labor. You know, that is the fact of the matter. That's how it's actually gone ahead and started to thrive. That, you know, many of the arguments that people make in regards to things like the Civil War was not about slavery. Of course, the Civil War was about slavery. It's the reason why the Southern states wanted to actually secede from the Union. Slavery was the major piece. It wasn't just a matter of governance, that there were disagreements between the North and the South. The major disagreement was over the institution of slavery. All right. And we have to begin to go ahead and teach the truth. But the truth we have to teach is one that doesn't just have to start in 1619. It's a truth that has to extend back in regards to going into ancient history. I mean, we have to look at the work of people like Dr. Clark, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, and so many others who go ahead and tell us that civilization, as we know it, begins where? In places like ancient Kemet, now known as Egypt, and Ethiopia. Okay? This is hard for white people, Europeans, to go ahead and take. All right? But when you go ahead and look at what Europeans were doing when civilizations were flourishing in places like Egypt and Ethiopia, you understand that truth at this particular point is the thing that we need. It's the vaccine that we need to go ahead and kill this particular virus of racism, this the disease of, as we say, racism, anti-Blackness. That's the disease. And the truth is the cure.
Think about the fact that the truth unfortunately is an area where people, I mean, look, we had someone in high office who spent most of their time creating fabrications, but other people believed it. And that's the sad point, that you have people who want to believe. You have people who have been nurtured from childhood on some of these misuntruths, and they don't want to let go of them. And the point is that I think as people start to realize, I mean, I always go back to the fact that when people think about Africa, the birthplace of humanity, and reality is all humanity can trace its ancestry to Africa. So when you think about that, and that is the truth, that's something that no one can debate, even though I'm sure there's someone who will. When you think about that, when people start to really look at what the truth is and they accept it, they don't necessarily have to feel it's putting anyone down. It's just talking about where we're at, and to really get a better sense of humanity, respect for everyone, and so forth. So when we think about that, and I'm going to go to you, Soraya, when you think about what we can do, understanding that there is an attack on truth. There are forces out there when you or others start to talk about what people believe is the true history. There are others who feel that they are attacked and they will challenge. What do we do about that?
More of us, more African Americans, need to teach their children our history. Read from authors like Dr. Bashawi said, John Henry Clark, Joseph Ben Yakinen. There are many Black authors out there who have written books about our history, and um, it's time that we have our kids know about these things and know about our achievements. We are the only ones that can teach our children. Other people doing it, we see the results. Either we're xed out of history, or they'll do it in a way that really um, negates or diminishes our history, because they're so fearful of true history. So we have to take this into our own hands. Stop leaving things to the school system. If you notice, there are Catholic schools, there are Jewish yeshivas, there are Muslim schools. And why are these places in existence? To teach stuff that is not taught in regular schools. So we have to have the same attitude, and we have to start, first of all, educate ourselves. And then afterward, start educating our children, our family, our friends, and it goes on and so forth. And guess what? After a while, the larger so-called society is going to see that you know certain things, and you believe certain things, and all of a sudden they're going to start to teach it. And then that may be really where the real problems come up, because then they'll try to negate certain things, and then you really have to start fighting with these folks. But it starts with us.
Brother Basir, I know you were very much front and center in that movement with the East. Tell us about the power and the impact of us taking control of the education of our children and our community.
We've got white scholars, European scholars, people like Herbert Aptheker, Melville Herskovitz, the Foner brothers, who go ahead and have done a great job in regards to going ahead and capturing some history and some truth. So the truth is out there. And if people want to go ahead and get it, they can go ahead and get it. And it doesn't mean that we're the only ones who need to go ahead and do that. All right. As far as the idea of educating our own, that is something, it's a task that we have to have. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad once said, if they don't treat you right, what makes you think they will teach you right? And I think that that's very, very, very true. We essentially send our children to a system that does not want to educate them that does not want them to compete with the children of white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, and other Europeans. They just do not want to compete with us. So they create a system of failure, which in effect prepares our children very often for prison or menial jobs, the service economy, working in McDonald's as a career. All right. So we have the responsibility of going ahead and creating our own institutions which can address these particular conditions. At Uhuru Sasa, which was the school, Uhuru Sasa meaning Freedom Now, which came out of the East Organization, started in 1970, we were able to take regular children and make them scholars, make them successes. I mean, when we go and look at what Uhuru Sasa and other independent schools around the country, because one of the things that happened is after Sasa and a few other schools were created, there were people around the country who wanted to see if they could recreate or at least try to copy some of what it was that we were doing in Brooklyn. So there was a national organization that was created, the Council of Independent Black Institutions, where we began to go ahead and train teachers for schools, independent Black schools around the country. Much of this is the work of Baba Kasisi Jitu Wayusi, who we just very recently honored by renaming a plaza in Brooklyn for him. All right. But the idea that if in fact we teach our own children that they will be successful, I think it's clear. We look at historically Black colleges and universities. The majority of Black people, African people, and we have to say that broadly because, we have people who come from literally from the continent of Africa to go ahead and go to Howard University or go to Spelman or go to Atlanta University and other schools in the Atlanta University Center. They come here because these particular schools have shown that they are more successful with our people than corresponding European-centered colleges and universities. All right. It's quite interesting to go ahead and see that, but it's something that we have to accept. I, for one, I was one of the people who, was knocking down barriers in majority white colleges and universities. All right. Would I have benefited more in regards to going to a historically Black college or university? Quite possibly. We made the best of what it was that we could do. But the idea is, and this extends back to struggles of people like Frederick Douglass and others, we have to educate ourselves, we have to educate our children, and we can't depend on anybody else. We need to be in that struggle because most of our children are going to interact with public school until there's some great, great change. Maybe reparations will provide us with the kind of funding that we would need to go ahead and create our own educational institutions around the country that would be responsible for the education of all of our children. But until that happens, this is a dual struggle. We have to go ahead and create our own institutions to educate our children, but we also have to impact the education that takes place in public schools, K through 12, and colleges and universities around the country.
Well, you raised an excellent point, and I appreciate that. But you said, if I understand you correctly, the parent power, the power of parents to affect change on the schools, and the power of parents to advocate for the truth. So, for example, as you said, when I think about certain states around the country that are changing information that our children learn about history, what's going on with those parents? Why aren't those parents out there outraged? I'm talking about the parents of color, as well as even if you think about all parents, why are you the fact that any parent would allow their child not to learn the truth is a concern. I mean, because it gives some children some feeling of superiority, that somehow they did everything when they didn't. And then at the risk of our children not learning about the truth of their history. So I think there's some work that has to be done. Information needs to get out there, because unfortunately there is a counter assault on the truth. It's been going on for a while, where people are feeling that they have to push back and limit the amount of truth, whether it be telling the truth about our history or truth about, but that's being under assault. And I think my concern, and I think our concern as educators, has to be, how can we ensure that all future generations learn the truth about American history, and particularly the role of people of African ancestry in it. Our history can't be limited to just Black history. It's American history. When we talk about the work, the things, I mean, if you look at everything in our home right now, there's something that an African person, the light that we're using, an African person of African ancestry had something to do with it. The ironing board, you can learn so many things that our people put that are helped humanity. So that's why this whole thinking that some folks have, that somehow they're going to limit information, they're really cutting off the reality of the fact that African people of African ancestry have made some major contributions to human history. And that's, I think, something that we as citizens, as humanitarians, as people of African ancestry need to be about. And I really appreciate. So I just, in closing, I just wanted you both to share some closing thoughts on this. Just 2 minutes each. I'm going to first, Sister Soraya, could you please share your thoughts about this topic in closing?
In closing, it's when it comes, we have to just get into the mindset that if not us, who? If not now, when? It's that simple and that difficult. If we don't do these things, if we don't impart knowledge to our children, um, if we don't educate them and fortify them in a society that feels threatened by them, then they may go out and make the mistakes that are going to harm them going forward. We need to know our history. Our history is our armor. I know my parents taught me Black history when I was a child. So, and that's armor. When you grow up, you're not growing up wanting to be white, feeling that they're smarter than you or better than you or have a better history than you. I never grew up feeling that way, and that's because I was brought up with a sense of self, knowing the achievements of my ancestors. So I didn't have to look up to anybody else's or feel they're smarter or they're better than me. The whole human family started in Africa with Black people. Civilization started there. That's what I was taught as a child. And if we fortify our children with this, we'll have less problems going forward, because it really helps you with the slings and arrows of society, always constantly trying to down you, tell you you're inferior, you can't do this, your people are just crass. Everything, all the arrows and daggers come to you, but you can certainly dismiss them and put them where they should be, which is in the rubbish bin, if you have that fortification of self knowledge.
You talked about the light bulb, and we need to understand that Lewis Latimer holds the patent for the carbon filament within the light bulb and the screw base, which allows us to take a light bulb and screw it into the socket so that it works. Very often people are told that it was Thomas Edison who invented the light bulb, and that's not true. So it's time for us to shed light on the truth, as Lewis Latimer did a long time ago. And it is ultimately the truth that will set us free.
I want to thank you both for your contribution to this episode. I think that we've given our listeners and our audience a lot of food for thought for further study and so I want to again thank you, Sister Soraya Nickens, for joining us, and thank you again, Brother Professor Basir and Chawi. Thank you
And
so
thank
much.
you.
I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. And please continue to look at our website at www.ccptv.org. But until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you. If you would like to support these broadcasts, we encourage you to send contributions to P.O. Box 300851, Jamaica, New York 11430. Thank you.